15 years after a forbidden rescue, Clara Sutton returns to a divided town, and to the man she's never forgotten. But when hatred ignites, can love bridge two worlds before it's too late? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The black mourning dress felt too tight around Clara Belle Sutton's neck as she stood at her father's grave. The cemetery of Willow Pass hadn't changed in the 8 years she'd been gone. Same iron gates, same willow trees swaying in the breeze, same judgmental stares from the townsfolk who gathered to pay their respects to Harold Sutton, one of their most respected citizens. "He would have wanted you to come home sooner," whispered Aunt Mabel, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Before the end," Clara nodded, the guilt heavy in her chest. "The telegram didn't reach Boston in time." This wasn't entirely true, but it was easier than explaining that she and her father hadn't spoken since she left for college against his wishes. As the preacher finished his sermon and the crowd began to disperse, Clara caught sight of her younger sister, Mary, standing by their mother. At 21, Mary had grown into a beautiful young woman, the perfect daughter who had stayed in Willow Pass, joined the church choir, and was now engaged to the son of the town's most successful rancher. "Clara," Mary rushed forward, embracing her. "I can't believe you're finally home." "Just for a while," Clara replied, already feeling the familiar suffocation that had driven her away years ago. "I need to settle father's affairs, then I'll head back east." Her mother approached, her face a mask of controlled grief. "You'll stay at the house, of course. Your old room is just as you left it." The Sutton house stood on the edge of town, a grand 2-story building with a wraparound porch and a view of the river in the distance. That river. Clara felt a shiver as she looked at its winding path through the valley. 15 years had passed, but she could still feel the cold water pulling her down, the panic as she struggled to breathe, and she could still see the face of the boy who had saved her. "Are you coming, Clara?" Her mother's voice snapped her back to the present. "Yes, I'll be right there." Later that evening, after a quiet dinner with her mother and sister, Clara excused herself and went to her old bedroom. Everything was indeed just as she had left it: the floral wallpaper, the bookshelf filled with adventure stories, the small writing desk where she had penned countless letters that she never sent. Clara opened the window, breathing in the night air. In the distance, beyond the river, she could make out the faint glow of fires from the Shoshone settlement. Was he still there? Had he stayed all these years, or had he moved on to somewhere people didn't look at him with suspicion and fear? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Mary entered, now wearing her nightgown, her long blonde hair hanging loose around her shoulders. "I thought you might want some company. It's been so long." Clara smiled, patting the space beside her on the bed. "Tell me everything I've missed." Mary sat down, tucking her feet beneath her like she used to do when they were children sharing secrets. "Well, I'm getting married in the fall. His name is Thomas Whitaker. Father approved of the match before he got sick." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, studying her sister's face. "Of course," Mary answered too quickly. "Thomas is a good man. He'll provide well for me." Clara bit her tongue. She hadn't come home to lecture her sister about marrying for love rather than security. "What about you?" Mary asked. "No suitors in Boston. Mother was sure you'd come home with a professor or a doctor in tow." Clara laughed. No suitors. I've been too busy with my studies and my work at the library." Mary's expression grew serious. "Clara, why did you really come back? You could have sent a lawyer to handle Father's estate." Clara hesitated. Could she tell Mary the truth? That for 15 years she had dreamed of dark eyes and gentle hands, of a boy who had saved her without asking for anything in return? "There's someone I need to find," she said finally. "Someone I've needed to thank for a very long time." Mary's eyes widened. "You don't mean—" "Clara, please tell me you're not talking about that Indian boy." "His name is Tama," Clara said firmly. "And he saved my life when everyone else was too far away to help. That was ages ago, and Father forbade us from even mentioning it." Mary lowered her voice, though they were alone in the room. "People still talk about it, you know. They say he put some kind of spell on you that day." Clara stood up, anger flaring. "He pulled me From the river when I was drowning. The only spell he cast was one of basic human decency, something this town seems to know very little about. Mary reached for her hand. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you, it's just... Things haven't changed much here, Clara. People still don't mix with the Shoshone except for trading. And Tama, well, his father is an elder now. They say Tama has strange powers. Who says that? Everyone. Reverend Parker mentions it in his sermons sometimes, about the dangers of pagan influence. Clara shook her head in disgust. Reverend Parker was spreading those same lies when we were children. I had hoped people might have grown wiser. Please don't do anything rash, Mary pleaded. You've only just come home. Give yourself time to grieve for father. Clara softened, seeing the genuine concern in her sister's eyes. I'll be careful, I promise. After Mary left, Clara pulled out her journal from her traveling case. She had kept it faithfully since she was 10 years old, recording her thoughts, her dreams, and always the memory of that day at the river. She opened to a blank page and began to write, I'm home in Willow Pass, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. Perhaps it never truly was. Tomorrow I'll go to the river. Tomorrow I'll start looking for him. For Tama. The next morning, Clara woke early, before the rest of the house stirred. She dressed in her simplest skirt and blouse, pulled her dark hair into a practical bun, and slipped out the back door. The morning air was crisp, heavy with dew, as she made her way down the familiar path to the river. The rushing water sounded just as it had 15 years ago, but Clara was no longer afraid of it. She followed the riverbank, moving upstream toward the spot where she had fallen in as a child. The large flat rocks where she had been playing that day were still there, smooth and inviting in the morning sun. Clara sat down on one of the rocks, running her hand over its cool surface. This was where it had happened. She had been playing alone, hopping from rock to rock, pretending she was crossing a great ocean. Her foot had slipped on a patch of moss, and suddenly she was in the water, the current pulling her under. She remembered the panic, the burning in her lungs as she tried to scream underwater, and then strong arms around her, pulling her up, dragging her to shore. The face of a boy not much older than herself, his dark eyes wide with concern, water dripping from his long black hair. Thank you, she had whispered when she could finally speak, and he had nodded just once before disappearing into the trees as the shouts of the search party grew closer. Her father had been furious when she told him who had saved her. Stay away from those people, he had warned. They're not like us. But in Clara's mind, that was precisely what made Tama special. He hadn't hesitated to help someone who was not like him. A snapping twig pulled Clara from her memories. She turned to see a woman standing a few yards away, watching her. She was clearly Shoshone, with long black hair braided down her back, wearing a simple dress with intricate beadwork at the collar. "Hello?" Clara said, standing up. "I didn't mean to trespass." The woman didn't respond, just continued to observe, her with a steady gaze. "My name is Clara Belle Sutton," she tried again. "I'm looking for someone named Tama. Do you know him?" At the mention of his name, the woman's expression changed subtly. "Why do you look for him? He saved my life once, a long time ago, right here in fact." Clara gestured to the river. "I've come back to thank him properly." The woman considered this for a moment. "Tama is gathering roots this morning, beyond the old oak grove," she pointed upstream. "But be warned, white woman. Our people have had their fill of false gratitude from yours." Before Clara could respond, the woman turned and disappeared into the trees just as Tama had done all those years ago. Clara stood for a moment, her heart pounding. He was here. After all this time, after all the dreams and wonderings, Tama was just beyond the oak grove. She gathered her skirt and began walking in the direction the woman had indicated, her steps quickening as she went. The oak grove was cool and dim after the sunlight by the river. Clara moved carefully between the massive trees, some of them hundreds of years old. Her father had once wanted to cut them down for lumber, but the town council had stopped him, calling the grove a historical landmark. As she emerged from the trees, she saw a figure kneeling on the ground about 50 yards away. Even from this distance, she knew it was him. The straight back, the measured movements as he dug in the earth and placed something in a pouch at his side. Clara took a deep breath and stepped forward, making enough noise that he would hear her approach. Tama stood in one fluid motion, turning to face her, and Clara stopped, transfixed. The boy she remembered had become a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with the same intense dark eyes that had haunted her dreams. His black hair was longer now, tied back with a leather cord. He wore simple buckskin pants and a cotton shirt, open slightly at the collar to reveal a necklace of carved wooden beads. "Tama," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He showed no surprise at seeing her, as if he had been expecting this moment just as she had. "Clara Belle Sutton," he replied, her name sounding like poetry in his deep voice. "You remember me?" It wasn't a question. How could I forget the girl from the river? He took a step toward her, studying her face. "You have traveled far from here." "Boston," she said. "I went to college there, but I came back because my father died." "I know. Word travels between our worlds even when people do not." His expression softened slightly. "I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Clara wasn't sure what to say next. All the speeches she had rehearsed in her mind seemed inadequate now that he was standing before her. "I came to find you, to thank you properly for saving my life that day." Tama was silent for a moment, his eyes never leaving hers. "You never belonged to them," he said finally, his voice soft but clear. "Even when you were small, your spirit moved like ours." Clara felt a tremor run through her at his words. "What do you mean?" "You question. You see beyond what others tell. You to see." He gestured to the forest around them. "That day at the river, you were exploring alone, testing your boundaries. No other white child would have dared. And I nearly drowned because of it," Clara said with a small smile. "Yet here you are again, crossing boundaries that others fear." Tama took another step toward her. "Why have you really come back, Clara Belle Sutton?" After 15 years, a simple thank you could have been sent in a letter. Clara felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze. "I wanted to see you, to know if you were real, or if I had built you up in my mind all these years. And now that you see me, you're even more than I remembered." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "You speak boldly for a woman of your town." "I haven't been a woman of this town for a long time," Clara replied. "And I have no intention of becoming one now." Tama studied her for a moment longer, then gestured to a fallen log nearby. "Sit with me. Tell me of your life beyond Willow Pass." They sat together in the clearing, and Clara told him about her years at college, her work at the Boston Public Library, the books she had read and the ideas that had shaped her. Tama listened intently, asking questions that revealed his own keen intelligence and curiosity about the world. In turn, he told her about his life, how he had become a healer, like his father, learning the properties of plants and the old ways of his people, how he had traveled to other Shoshone settlements, but always returned to the land of his ancestors. "And the people of Willow Pass?" Clara asked. "How do they treat your people now?" Tama's expression grew serious. "They tolerate us as long as we stay on our side of the river. Sometimes they come seeking medicines when their doctors fail them, but there is no true friendship between our worlds." "That's what I feared," Clara sighed. "This town never changes." "But people can," Tama said, his eyes meeting hers. "You have." The sun had climbed high in the sky, and Clara realized with a start how long they had been talking. "I should get back. My mother and sister will be worried." Tama nodded. "Will you come again?" Clara's heart leaped at the question. "Yes, tomorrow if I can. I will be here." He stood and offered his hand to help her up. When their fingers touched, Clara felt a jolt of connection that took her breath away. Tama felt it too. She could see it in the slight widening of his eyes. "Until tomorrow, Clara Belle Sutton," he said, releasing her hand. "Until tomorrow," she echoed. As Clara walked back through the oak grove toward home, her mind was spinning. She had found him, spoken with him, and now she was certain the connection she had felt all these years was real. But what would come of it? How could she bridge the gap between their worlds? When she reached the edge of town, she was so lost in thought that she nearly collided with a man coming out of the general store. Well, well, Clara Belle Sutton back in Willow Pass at last. Clara looked up to see James Parker, the Reverend's son and her former suitor, blocking her path. He was handsome in the conventional way that had always been celebrated in Willow Pass, tall, blonde, blue-eyed, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hello, James," she said politely. "If you'll excuse me, I need to get home." "Not so fast." He stepped closer, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Where have you been all morning? Your mother's been asking all over town for you." "I went for a walk by the river to clear my head." James's eyes narrowed. "The river, huh? Bringing back old memories." The way he said it made it clear he was referring to the drowning incident and to Tama. "I'm mourning my father," Clara said firmly. "Now please let me pass." "Of course." James stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. "But a word of advice, Clara. Boston may have filled your head with all sorts of modern ideas, but Willow Pass is still Willow Pass. Some lines shouldn't be crossed." Clara met his gaze steadily. "Goodbye, James." As she walked away, she could feel his eyes on her back. The peaceful feeling from her morning with Tamar began to fade, replaced by a familiar tension. James Parker had always been a bully, hiding behind his father's religious authority to pass judgment on others. When Clara reached home, she found her mother pacing the front porch. "Where have you been?" Elizabeth Sutton demanded. "We've been worried sick." "I'm sorry, Mother. I went for a walk by the river and lost track of time." Her mother's face paled. "The river? Clara, you know how dangerous—" "I'm not a child anymore," Clara interrupted gently. "And the river holds no fear for me now." Elizabeth studied her daughter's face. "There's something different about you today. What aren't you telling me?" Clara hesitated. She wasn't ready to tell her mother about Tama, not yet. "I'm just finding my bearings again. It's strange to be back after so long." "Well, come inside. We need to go through your father's papers this afternoon. The lawyer is coming tomorrow." As Clara followed her mother into the house, she felt a pang of guilt for her deception, but the memory of Tama's words echoed in her mind. "You never belonged to them," and for the first time in her life, Clara was beginning to believe that might be true. That night, Clara lay awake in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow she would see Tama again. Tomorrow she would take another step toward the future she had dreamed of for 15 years, a future that would scandalize Willow Pass and break her mother's heart. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, Clara felt a peace she hadn't known in years. For once in her life, she was following her heart instead of others' expectations. And no matter what happened next, she wouldn't regret that choice. Beyond the river, in a small cabin built with his own hands, Tama also lay awake. The girl from the river had returned just as the vision had shown him she would. Her spirit was even stronger than he remembered, her eyes clearer, her voice more certain. "Clara Bell Sutton," he whispered to the darkness. "The current brought you back to me." And somewhere between them, the river continued its ancient journey, carving a path through the land that divided their worlds, and perhaps at last, creating a way to bring them together. The next morning, Clara woke with the sun. She dressed quickly in a simple blue dress, pinned her hair in a loose bun and hurried downstairs. Her mother and sister were already at the breakfast table. "You're up early," Elizabeth Sutton remarked, eyeing her daughter's outfit. "And where are you rushing?" "Off to? The lawyer won't be here until noon." Clara buttered a piece of toast, avoiding her mother's gaze. "I thought I'd take another walk. The fresh air helps me think." Mary gave her a knowing look. "By the river again?" "Perhaps." Clara sipped her coffee, trying to appear casual. "Father's death has stirred up a lot of memories," Elizabeth sighed. "Well, don't wander too far and be back before Mr. Hamilton arrives. There's much to discuss about the estate." Clara nodded, quickly finishing her breakfast. As she stood to leave, Mary jumped up too. "I'll walk with you part of the way," she said. "I need to drop off some mending at Mrs. Wilson's." Once they were outside and out of their mother's earshot, Mary grabbed Clara's arm. "You're going to see him again, aren't you? That Indian man." "His name is Tama," Clara said firmly. "And yes, I am." Mary's blue eyes filled with worry. "Clara, please be careful. James Parker was asking about you in town yesterday. He seems very interested in where you go and who you see." "James Parker has no right to monitor my movements," Clara said, anger flaring. "We stopped courting years ago, before I even left for college. That may be true, but his father is still the most influential man in Willow Pass. If Reverend Parker decides you're fraternizing with the Shoshone, it could make things very difficult for all of us." They had reached the edge of town, where the path forked, one way leading to the residential area where Mrs. Wilson lived, the other toward the river. Clara took her sister's hands. "Mary, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not the same girl who left Willow Pass 8 years ago. I've seen a wider world, with different ideas about how people should live and love." "Love?" Mary's eyes widened. "Clara, you've only just met him again. Some connections don't need time," Clara said softly. "They just need recognition." Mary shook her head, clearly troubled. "Promise me you won't do anything rash. At least wait until Father's estate is settled before you make any decisions that can't be undone. I promise to be thoughtful," Clara said, which wasn't exactly what Mary had asked for. Her sister seemed to realize this but didn't press further. "I'll see you at home later," she said, turning toward Mrs. Wilson's house. Clara watched her go, feeling a pang of guilt for the worry she was causing. But the pull toward the river, toward Tama, was stronger than any guilt. The morning was bright and clear as Clara made her way to the oak grove. Her heart beat faster as she approached the clearing where they had talked the day before. Would he be there? Had he meant it when he said he would wait for her? The clearing was empty, but Clara noticed a small bundle of wildflowers placed on the fallen log where they had sat. She picked them up, smiling at the simple purple and white blooms. "They are called Heart's Ease," came Tama's voice from behind her. "My people use them to calm troubled spirits." Clara turned to see him standing at the edge of the clearing, watching her with those intense dark eyes. Today he wore a blue shirt that made his copper skin glow in the dappled sunlight. "They're beautiful," she said. "Thank you." "You came back," he said, stepping closer. "I said I would." Tama nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. "Many people say things they don't mean." "I'm not many people," Clara replied. His smile widened. "No, you are not." He gestured to the path leading deeper into the forest. "Walk with me. There is something I want to show you." Clara tucked the flowers into her belt and followed him. They walked side by side through the trees, not touching but close enough that Clara could feel the warmth radiating from him. "The woman I met yesterday," Clara said. "Who was she?" "My cousin, Naya. She is protective of our people, of me." Tama glanced at her. "She told me you were looking for me." "Was she upset?" "Curious." "Like everyone else." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Everyone else?" "Word travels quickly among my people. The white woman who nearly drowned as a child has returned, asking for the man who saved her." Tama's voice held a hint of amusement. "It makes a good story around the evening fires." "And what do they think of this story?" Clara asked. "Some think it is romantic. Others think it will end in tears." Tama stopped walking and turned to face her. "What do you think, Clara Bell Sutton? How does your story end?" The directness of his question took her breath away. I don't know yet, but I want to find out." Tama studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Come, we're almost there." They continued walking until the trees opened onto a small meadow filled with wildflowers. In the center stood a modest cabin, beautifully crafted of logs and stone with smoke curling from a stone chimney. "Your home?" Clara asked. "Yes. I built it 3 summers ago, when my father told me it was time to have my own place." He led her to the cabin's porch. Few white people have seen it. Clara felt honored by his trust. "It's wonderful." Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable, with handmade furniture, colorful woven rugs, and shelves lined with jars of dried plants and herbs. A large window overlooked the meadow, flooding the main room with light. "You live here alone?" Clara asked, taking in the single bed in the corner. "Yes. I have not yet found a wife." His eyes met hers briefly before he moved to the fireplace, where a pot hung over low flames. "Would you like some tea? It is made from local herbs." "Yes, please." Tama poured the fragrant tea into 2 clay cups and gestured for Clara to sit at the small table. As they drank, he told her about his work as a healer, about the plants he gathered and the remedies he made for his people. "Do you ever treat white people?" Clara asked. Sometimes, when their doctors have given up hope. Tamar's expression grew serious. Last winter, a farmer's child was very sick. The doctor in town said there was nothing more to be done. The mother came to me in secret, desperate. I gave her a tea to reduce the fever and showed her how to make a poultice for the chest. Did the child recover? Yes, but the father told everyone it was the doctor's medicine that finally worked. Tamar shrugged. It doesn't matter what they believe as long as the child lives. Clara felt a surge of admiration for him. You're a good man, Tamar. He looked at her over his cup. And you, Clara Bell Sutton, are not what your town thinks you are. What do you mean? They see a woman who went away to school and came back with strange ideas, a daughter who disobeyed her father. But I see someone who follows her own heart, even when the path is difficult. Clara felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. How do you know me so well after only 2 days? I have known you since you were 8 years old, Tamar said simply. Not just when I pulled you from the river, but after. I used to watch you sometimes when you came to play by the water. You were always different, curious, unafraid. You watched me. Clara was surprised. From a distance. My father warned me to stay away from white people, but I was curious about the girl with the brave spirit. Tamar looked down at his cup. When you left Willow Pass, I asked the traders about you sometimes. They said you had gone east to school. Clara was deeply moved by this revelation. While she had been dreaming about him in Boston, he had been thinking of her too. I never forgot you, she said softly. Not for a single day. Tamar reached across the table and, after a moment's hesitation, took her hand in his. His skin was warm and calloused from work, his touch gentle but firm. In my people's stories, he said, there are spirits who guide us to our true path. Perhaps the river spirit brought us together that day for a reason. Clara turned her hand in his so their palms met. I believe it did. They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined, eyes locked in a silent communication more powerful than words. Then the distant sound of the town church bell broke the spell. It's nearly noon, Clara said reluctantly. I have to meet with the lawyer about my father's will. Tamar nodded, releasing her hand. I understand. Can I come again tomorrow? I will be here. He walked her to the door. Be careful in town, Clara. Your people are not as accepting as you. They're not my people anymore, she said firmly. Not in the ways that matter. Tamar touched her cheek gently. Go now. Take care of your family business. The river will still be here tomorrow. Clara hurried back through the forest, her mind and heart full of Tamar. His home, his touch, the way he looked at her as if he could see inside her soul. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the figure watching from the trees as she crossed back into town. James Parker stepped out onto the path just as she passed, making her jump in surprise. Good morning, Clara, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Enjoying another walk by the river? Clara composed herself quickly. James, you startled me. Did I? I apologize. He fell into step beside her, though she hadn't invited him to join her. You seem to spend a lot of time by the water these days. It's peaceful there. Indeed. James looked at her sidelong. Though I heard you weren't alone today. Clara's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. I don't know. What you mean? No? James stopped walking, forcing her to stop too. Clara, we've known each other since we were children. I care about what happens to you. That's very kind but unnecessary. Is it? His voice hardened slightly. Because from where I stand, it looks like you're heading down a dangerous path, fraternizing with those people. Clara lifted her chin. If by those people you mean the Shoshone, they have names, James, and lives and feelings just like us. James's eyes narrowed as he noticed the wildflowers tucked into her belt. My father has been very clear about the spiritual dangers of mixing with pagans. Their beliefs are an affront to God. Your father doesn't speak for God, Clara said sharply, and neither do you. Be careful, Clara, James warned, his handsome face hardening into something ugly. Willow Pass has ways of dealing with women who forget their place. Before Clara could respond, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving her shaken and angry. On the path. When she reached home, the lawyer's carriage was already outside. Clara quickly composed herself and went inside to join her mother and sister in the study. Mr. Hamilton, a balding man with spectacles and a perpetually worried expression, was laying out papers on her father's desk. "Ah, Miss Sutton, there you are," he said, nodding to Clara. "Shall we begin?" The reading of the will was straightforward. Harold Sutton had left the house to his wife, a modest trust to Mary for her future security, and, to Clara's surprise, the deed to a piece of land to her. "Land?" Clara asked, confused. "What land?" Mr. Hamilton adjusted his spectacles. "It's a parcel about 5 miles outside of town near the river. 20 acres with a small hunting cabin. Your father purchased it about 10 years ago as an investment, but never developed it." "Why would he leave that to me?" Clara wondered aloud. Her father had never mentioned owning such property. "He specifically added this bequest 3 years ago," Mr. Hamilton said, "after you wrote that you might someday want to return to the West to establish a library." Clara was stunned. She had indeed written such a letter, never expecting her father to take her seriously. He had never replied. "There's also this," Mr. Hamilton added, handing her a sealed envelope. "Your father asked that this be given to you privately." That evening, after dinner, Clara retreated to her room to read her father's letter. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal. "My dear Clara, if you are reading this, I have passed, without the chance to mend what was broken between us. For that I am sorry. A father should not let pride stand between him and his child, yet that is exactly what I did. The land I have left you is yours to do with as you please. It is good. Land with fresh water and fertile soil. You always loved the river, despite what happened there, or perhaps because of it. I never understood that, just as I never understood your fascination with the Shoshone boy who pulled you from the water. I was afraid that day, Clara, afraid of how close I came to losing you, and in my fear, I directed my anger at the very person who had saved you, simply because he was different from us. It was wrong of me, and though I never said so in life, I say it now, I was wrong. You have always had a mind of your own, a spirit that could not be tamed by the small thinking of a small town. It is what makes you special, though it has not always made you easy to raise. Your mother will not understand the choices you make. She has never strayed from the path set before her, but know that in my final years, I came to respect your courage, even when I did not agree with your decisions. Be happy, Clara. That is all a father truly wants for his child. With love and regret for words left unspoken, your father, Clara, read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. All these years, she had thought her father unyielding in his prejudice, yet in the end he had understood her better than she knew. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mary entered, concern on her face when she saw Clara's tears. "What's wrong? What did father's letter say?" Clara handed it to her sister, watching Mary's expression change from concern to surprise as she read. "He knew," Mary said finally, looking up, "about your feelings for the Indian, for Tama." "It seems he did," Clara replied, wiping her eyes. "Better than I realized." Mary sat beside her on the bed. "What will you do with the land?" Clara looked out the window toward the river, barely visible in the gathering dusk. "I don't know yet, but it changes things, doesn't it? To have a place of my own, not dependent on Mother's charity or the town's approval. You're not thinking of living there." Mary looked alarmed. "Clara, it's miles from town, with no neighbors or protection." "I haven't decided anything," Clara assured her. "But the choice is mine now. Father gave me that much." Later that night, Clara couldn't sleep. Her father's unexpected letter had shifted something inside her. He had seen her, truly seen her, and in the end had given her his blessing, however reluctantly. She got up and sat by the window, looking out at the starlit sky. Somewhere beyond the river, Tama was perhaps looking at the same stars. Tomorrow, she would tell him about the land, about her father's letter. Tomorrow they would take another step on this unexpected path together. But the peace of the moment was broken by the memory of James's warning earlier that day. Willow Pass had ways of dealing with women who forgot their place. What did he mean, and how far would he go to enforce the town's narrow views? The next morning, Clara went to the general store to purchase supplies. She had decided to visit her newly inherited land and wanted to bring food for a picnic. The store was busy with morning shoppers, mostly women gathering provisions for the day's meals. As Clara waited at the counter, she became aware of hushed conversations and sidelong glances. When Mrs. Peterson, the minister's wife, deliberately moved away from her, Clara realized something was wrong. "That will be 75 cents," said Mr. Roberts, the shopkeeper, his usually friendly face now cold and distant. Clara handed him the money. "Is everything all right, Mr. Roberts? You seem troubled." The older man glanced around nervously. "Miss Sutton, I've known you since you were a girl, so I'll speak plainly. There's talk in town about you spending time across the river with the Indian healer." Clara felt her face flush, but she kept her voice steady. "His name is Tama. And yes, I have been visiting him. He saved my life once, if you recall." "That was a long time ago," Mr. Roberts said, lowering his voice. "Gratitude is one thing, but people are saying there's more to it." "And if there is?" Clara challenged. The store fell silent as everyone turned to stare at her. Mr. Roberts looked shocked. "Miss Sutton, you can't mean that. It's not natural, not right." "Who decides what's right, Mr. Roberts? You? Reverend Parker? This town?" Clara felt a lifetime of frustration rising in her chest. "Tama is a good man, a healer who helps anyone in need, regardless of their race or beliefs. That seems more Christian to me than the judgment I see here." Mrs. Peterson gasped. "How dare you question our Christian values? Your poor father must be turning in his grave." "My father," Clara said clearly, "left me a letter expressing regret for his prejudice against the Shoshone. Perhaps he learned something in his final years that this town has yet to understand." She gathered her purchases and walked out, head held high despite the shocked whispers behind her. It was done now. She had declared her feelings publicly. There was no going back. Clara walked quickly toward the river, eager to escape the stifling atmosphere of the town. As she crossed the bridge, she saw a figure waiting on the other side, Tama, standing tall and dignified in the morning light. "You heard," she said as she approached him. "Naya told me there was trouble in town." His eyes searched her face. "Are you all right?" "I am now." Clara stepped closer to him. "I inherited some land from my father, near the river, not far from here. I was going to see it today. Will you come with me?" Tama hesitated. "It might not be wise to be seen together right now." "I don't care anymore," Clara said firmly. "I've already shocked the town. Might as well give them something real to talk about." A slow smile spread across Tama's face. "You truly are not like other white women, Clara Bell Sutton." "No," she agreed, smiling back. "I'm not." They walked together along the riverbank, talking easily about Clara's meeting with the lawyer and her father's surprising letter. Tama listened thoughtfully, asking questions about the land and its location. "I think I know the place," he said finally. "There is a small cabin on a hill overlooking a bend in the river. Good hunting grounds nearby and fertile soil in the valley below." "That sounds right," Clara said. "Have you been there?" "Many times, though I did not know it belonged to your father. It sits on the edge of traditional Shoshone lands." Tama glanced at her. "What will you do with it?" "I'm not sure yet," Clara admitted, "but it gives me choices I didn't have before." They had been walking for about an hour when Tama pointed to a narrow path leading away from the river. "This way." The path wound up a gentle slope through pine trees until it opened onto a small clearing. There, as Tama had described, stood a simple log cabin overlooking a bend in the river. Though weathered and clearly unused for some time, the structure appeared sound. "It's perfect," Clara breathed, taking in the view. The river glittered below, and beyond it mountains rose blue in the distance. "Let me check inside," Tama said, approaching the cabin cautiously. He examined the door and windows, then pushed the door open. It seems secure. No animals have made it their home. Inside, the cabin was basic but well built, with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table and chairs, and a narrow bed frame against one wall. Dust covered everything, but Clara could see the potential. "With some cleaning and a few supplies, this could be quite comfortable," she said, running her hand along the sturdy mantel. Tama watched her, a question in his eyes. "You are thinking of living here?" "Perhaps." Clara turned to him. It would. Be mine. My own place, not subject to the town's approval or my mother's rules. It is very isolated, Tama pointed out. The winters are harsh here. I wouldn't be alone, Clara said softly, holding his gaze. Not if you were nearby. Tama stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Clara, what are you saying? I'm saying that I've spent 15 years dreaming of the boy who saved me from the river. And now I've found that he's become a man even more remarkable than I imagined. Clara took a deep breath. I'm saying that I believe we were meant to find each other again. Tama reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished. When she didn't move, he gently touched her face, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. In my people's tradition, he said, his voice low, when a man wishes to court a woman, he must first prove himself worthy to her family. He brings gifts, shows his skills as a hunter and provider. And what does the woman do? Clara asked, her heart pounding. She decides if his heart is true. Tama's hand slid to the back of her neck, drawing her closer. Is my heart true, Clara Bell Sutton? Yes, she whispered. I believe it is. His lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. Clara had been kissed before, awkward, fumbling encounters with boys in Boston, but never like this, never with such tenderness and certainty. When they finally broke apart, Tama rested his forehead against hers. This path will not be easy, he warned. Your town will not accept us. My people will be wary. I don't need easy, Clara said. I just need true. They spent the afternoon at the cabin, sharing the picnic Clara had brought and making plans for repairs and improvements. Tama showed her which plants growing nearby were useful for medicine or cooking, and pointed out animal tracks in the soft earth. As the sun began to lower in the sky, they reluctantly gathered their things to leave. Clara knew her mother would be worried if she stayed out much longer. I'll come again tomorrow, she promised as they walked back toward the river. We can start clearing away some of the brush around the cabin. Tama nodded, but his expression had grown serious. Be careful in town tonight, Clara. Word will have spread about what you said in the store this morning. Let it spread, Clara said defiantly. I'm tired of hiding how I feel. They parted at the bridge, Tama heading back to his own cabin while Clara crossed into town. She had only gone a short distance when she saw a group of people gathered outside the church. As she drew closer, she realized it was a town meeting, and from the angry voices she could guess the topic of discussion. Clara hesitated, tempted to slip past unnoticed. But then she squared her shoulders and walked directly toward the crowd. If they were going to talk about her, they could do it to her face. Reverend Parker stood on the church steps, his black coat and white collar lending him an air of authority as he addressed the gathered townspeople. James stood beside his father, his expression smug. Cannot allow such behavior in our God-fearing community, the Reverend was saying. It sets a dangerous precedent for our young people and insults the memory of good Christian men like Harold Sutton. My father's memory is not yours to invoke, Reverend Parker, Clara called out, stepping through the crowd. And neither is my life yours to judge. A hush fell over the gathering as all eyes turned to her. Clara felt a moment of fear, then remembered Tama's steady gaze, his gentle touch. She lifted her chin and continued walking until she stood before the church steps. Miss Sutton, Reverend Parker said coldly, we were just discussing the disturbing reports of your inappropriate associations. You mean my friendship with Tama, the man who saved my life when I was a child? Clara asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. The skilled healer who has helped many in this town, though they're too proud to admit it. That was a long time. Sago, the Reverend said dismissively, and whatever debt of gratitude you might have owed has surely been paid by now. This isn't about gratitude, Clara said firmly. It's about seeing the worth in a person, regardless of where they were born, or the color of their skin. Isn't that what your Bible teaches, Reverend? To love thy neighbor, murmurs ran through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, while others shook their heads in disapproval. The Indian is not our neighbor, James cut in. He and his kind have their own place, beyond the river where they belong. His name is Tama, Clara said, anger rising. And he has more compassion and wisdom in his little finger than you have in your entire body, James Parker." James flushed with anger. Listen to her, defending a savage over her own kind. This is exactly the corrupting influence we're concerned about. Enough, the voice came from the back of the crowd. Clara turned to see her mother pushing her way forward, Mary close behind her. "That is my daughter you're speaking about, James Parker, and I will not have her insulted in public." Elizabeth Sutton reached Clara's side, her face set in the determined expression Clara knew so well. Though they had their differences, in that moment, Clara had never been more grateful for her mother's fierce protective instinct. "Mrs. Sutton," Reverend Parker said, softening his tone, "we understand your concern as a mother, but surely you can see that Clara's behavior is causing talk that reflects poorly on your entire family." "What I see," Elizabeth said clearly, "is a town meeting being held to gossip about my daughter without the courtesy of inviting us to participate." She took Clara's arm. "Whatever concerns you have can be addressed properly, at a proper time. Not like this." Without waiting for a response, Elizabeth turned and led Clara away from the church, Mary following close behind. The crowd parted to let them pass, some looking ashamed, others still hostile. "Mother," Clara began once they were out of earshot. "Not now," Elizabeth said tightly. "Wait until we're home." The walk back to the Sutton house was tense and silent. Clara braced herself for the confrontation to come. Her mother had defended her publicly, but that didn't mean she approved of Clara's choices. Once they were inside with the door firmly closed, Elizabeth turned to face her eldest daughter. "Is it true?" she asked directly. "Are you involved with the Indian man, with Tama?" Clara met her mother's gaze steadily. "Yes, I care for him deeply, Mother, and he cares for me." Elizabeth closed her eyes briefly, as if in pain. "Clara, do you have any idea what you're doing? The scandal this will cause, the damage to your reputation, to our family name. I'm not trying to hurt you or Mary," Clara said gently. "But I can't live my life to please this town anymore. I've tried. It nearly broke me." "And what about your future?" Elizabeth demanded. "What kind of life do you think you'll have with him? Where would you even live?" "Father left me land by the river," Clara reminded her. "There's a cabin there. It needs work, but it could be a home." Elizabeth looked shocked. "You can't. Be serious. You would live in the wilderness with his name is Tama," Clara said firmly. "And yes, I would live with him if he asked me. I would marry him." Mary gasped. "Clara, you've only just reunited with him." "Sometimes the heart knows what it wants," Clara said simply. "I've dreamed of him for 15 years. Now that I've found him again, I won't let him go because of what people might say." Elizabeth sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than her years. "Your father would never have allowed this." Clara knelt beside her mother. "Actually, he might have understood better than you think." She pulled out the letter from her pocket. "Read what he wrote to me, Mother. Read his last words." Elizabeth took the letter with trembling hands. As she read, tears filled her eyes. When she finished, she looked up at Clara with a mixture of disbelief and resignation. "He knew," she whispered. "All these years, he knew how you felt. And in the end, he accepted it," Clara said gently. "He gave me the land, Mother, a place where I could make my own choices." Elizabeth folded the letter carefully and handed it back. "I need time, Clara. It's too much to take in at once." "I understand," Clara said, rising to her feet. "But please know that I'm not doing this to hurt you or to rebel. I'm following my heart, just as you followed yours when you married Father." That night, as Clara prepared for bed, Mary came to her room. Her sister's face was troubled as she sat on the edge of Clara's bed. "Is it really worth it?" she asked quietly. "Turning the whole town against you for this man?" Clara sat beside her. "When I'm with Tama, I feel complete in a way I never have before. It's as if I've found the missing piece of myself. Can you understand that?" Mary was silent for a long moment. "I envy you," she finally said. "I've never felt that way about Thomas. He's a good man, and he'll be a good husband. But there's no fire," Clara finished for her. "No feeling that you were meant to find each other." Mary nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Is that wrong of me? To marry a man I respect, but don't love the way you love Tamar? Clara put her arm around her sister. There's no right or wrong way to love, Mary. Some flames burn bright and hot from the first moment. Others grow slowly over time. Thomas cares for you, and you for him. That's a foundation you can build on. But what if it's never enough? Mary whispered. What if I always wonder what I missed? Clara had no easy answer for that. She simply held her sister as Mary cried quietly against her shoulder. They had chosen different paths, Clara following her heart's wildest desires, Mary taking the safer road of duty and expectation. Only time would tell which path led to true happiness. Outside the Sutton house, unseen in the shadows, James Parker watched the lights in the upstairs windows. His handsome face was twisted with anger and wounded pride. The girl who had once been promised to him had humiliated him in front of the entire town, choosing a savage over a respectable white man. "This isn't over, Clara," he muttered. "Not by a long shot." He turned and walked toward the saloon at the edge of town, where men who shared his views would be gathered. There were ways to deal with Indians who forgot their place, and women who defied the natural order. James intended to explore all of them. The next morning, Clara woke early, determined to return to her cabin and continue making plans with Tamar. She dressed quickly in her most practical skirt and a sturdy blouse, then packed a basket with food and cleaning supplies. When she went downstairs, she found her mother already at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, her face drawn from a sleepless night. "You're going to him again," Elizabeth said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes," Clara replied, setting her basket on the table. "I'm going to start cleaning up the cabin. There's much to do if it's going to be habitable." Elizabeth sighed deeply. "Clara, please reconsider this path you're taking. It's not too late to mend fences with the town. If you stayed away from the Indian, from Tamar, for a while, people, I would eventually forget." "I don't want them to forget, Mother," Clara said gently. "I want them to understand. Tamar is a good man, if they could see past their prejudice." "People don't change that easily," Elizabeth interrupted, "especially not in a place like Willow Pass. Beliefs run deep here." She reached across the table to take Clara's hand. "I'm worried for your safety, Clara. The way some of the men were talking yesterday at the church meeting. It wasn't just disapproval. There was hatred there." Clara squeezed her mother's hand. "I know, but I can't let fear dictate my life. Father gave me that land for a reason. Maybe he knew this day would come." Elizabeth was silent for a moment, then asked, "Do you truly love him? This Tamar?" "With all my heart," Clara answered without hesitation. "And does he love you?" Clara thought of Tamar's gentle touch, his wise eyes, the way he looked at her as if she were the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. "Yes," she said softly. "He does." Elizabeth studied her daughter's face, then nodded slowly. "Your father always said you had his stubborn spirit. Once you set your mind to something, there was no turning you from it." She released Clara's hand and stood up. "Wait here." Her mother left the room and returned a few minutes later, carrying a small wooden box. She placed it on the table in front of Clara. "These were my grandmother's," Elizabeth said, opening the box to reveal a set of silver spoons, a lace tablecloth, carefully folded, and a simple gold band. "I was saving them for when you married. I suppose now is as good a time as any." Clara stared at her mother in shock. "Are you giving me your blessing?" "I'm giving you what any mother would give her daughter who's setting up her own home," Elizabeth said carefully. "Whether I approve of your choices or not, you are still my child. I won't send you out into the world empty-handed." Tears filled Clara's eyes as she embraced her mother. "Thank you," she whispered. Elizabeth held her tightly for a moment, then stepped back, wiping her own eyes. "Just promise me you'll be careful, and that you'll always have a place for your sister and me in your life, no matter what happens." "I promise," Clara said. "Always." With her basket now containing her grandmother's treasures along with the cleaning supplies, Clara set out for the river. The morning was bright and clear, the air filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. Despite the tension in town, Clara felt a sense of hope and purpose she had never experienced before. As she approached the bridge, she saw a familiar figure waiting on the other side, Tamar, tall and steady in the morning light. Her heart quickened at the sight of him. "You came," she called as she crossed the bridge. "I worried about you after yesterday," he replied, taking the heavy basket from her hands. "Naya heard about the meeting at the church. News travels fast," Clara remarked. "In both our worlds." Tamar's eyes searched her face. "Are you all right?" "Better than all right," Clara said, slipping her hand into his. "My mother gave me these family heirlooms this morning. I think she's beginning to accept us in her own way." Tamar looked surprised. "That is unexpected. Good, but unexpected." They walked hand in hand toward the cabin, Clara telling him about her conversation with her mother and sister. Tamar listened thoughtfully, occasionally asking a question or offering an insight. "Your sister's marriage," he said at one point. "It troubles you." Clara nodded. "Mary is marrying a man she respects but doesn't truly love. I worry she'll regret it someday." "Sometimes love grows slowly," Tamar said. "Not all flames burn hot at first sight." "That's almost exactly what I told her," Clara said with a smile. "But I still worry. Thomas Whitaker is a good man, but so conventional. And Mary has always followed the rules, even when they made her unhappy." "Not everyone has your courage, Clara Bell Sutton," Tamar said, his dark eyes warm with admiration. When they reached the cabin, they found someone had been there before them. The door stood slightly ajar, and as they approached cautiously, Clara gasped at what she saw. The inside of the cabin had been vandalized. The table was overturned, the chair broken, and crude words had been painted on the walls. "Indian lover." "And go back where you belong." "Oh, Tamar," Clara breathed, tears stinging her eyes. "Who would do such a thing?" Tamar's face was grim as he surveyed the damage. "Someone who wants to frighten you, to make you doubt your path." "James Parker," Clara said with sudden certainty. "He was watching us yesterday. He must have followed us here." Tamar moved through the cabin, checking each corner. "He did not come alone. There were at least 3 men here." Clara felt a chill. "How can you tell?" "Different boot prints in the dust," Tamar said, pointing to the floor, "and different handwriting on the walls." He moved to the fireplace and crouched down, examining something. When he straightened, his expression was even more serious. "What is it?" Clara asked. "They left this." Tamar held up a crude doll made of sticks and cloth, with black yarn for hair and a feather tied to its head. A piece of red string was knotted around its neck like a noose. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "Is that supposed to be you?" "A warning," Tamar said, his voice tight. "We should go. It's not safe here right now." "No," Clara said firmly, setting down her basket. "I won't be. Frightened away from my own property. This is exactly what they want, to scare us into giving up." She began picking up the broken pieces of the chair. "We'll clean this place up, fix what's broken, and make it even better than before. I won't let them win, Tamar." Tamar watched her. For a moment, then nodded. "Your spirit is strong, Clara Bell Sutton." He moved to help her, carefully setting aside the crude doll. "But we must be cautious. These men are dangerous." They spent the morning cleaning and repairing what they could. Clara scrubbed the hateful words from the walls, while Tamar fixed the broken furniture and secured the door and windows. "We should make new locks," he said, examining the damaged door latch. "Stronger ones." "Can you do that?" Clara asked. "Yes. My father taught me to work with metal. I can forge new locks and hinges." Tamar looked around the cabin. "This place can be made secure with time and work." Clara stood beside him, surveying their progress. The cabin was still rough, but the worst of the damage had been cleaned up. It felt like a victory, small but significant. "Thank you," she said, touching his arm, "for helping me, for not telling me to give up." Tamar turned to face her, his expression softening. "I would never ask you to give up what matters to you, Clara. That is not love." "And this is?" she asked softly. "Love?" In answer, Tamar cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gently at first, then with a growing passion that took her breath away. Clara wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart against hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Tama rested his forehead against hers. "Yes," he said simply. "This is love." Clara smiled, joy bubbling up inside her despite the morning's disturbing discovery. Then nothing else matters. They shared a simple lunch on the porch of the cabin, planning the work that needed to be done. In the coming days, Tama would bring tools to strengthen the structure, while Clara would make curtains for the windows and gather supplies to make the interior more comfortable. "I should speak to my people about us," Tama said as they packed up to leave. "There will be questions, concerns. Will they accept me?" Clara asked, suddenly nervous. "Some will, others will need time." Tama took her hand. "My father is wise. He will listen before he judges. But he will worry about what this means for our future, for any children we might have." The mention of children sent a thrill through Clara. She hadn't thought that far ahead, but the idea of a family with Tama, children with his dark eyes and her curious spirit, filled her with a longing she hadn't known she possessed. "I would like to meet your father," she said. "All your family." "Soon," Tama promised, "but first we must deal with the threat from town. I don't want to bring you to my people with danger following at our heels." As they walked back toward the river, Clara noticed Tama scanning the trees constantly, alert for any sign of trouble. His vigilance reminded her that the vandalism at the cabin wasn't just an annoyance, it was a warning of worse to come. When they reached the bridge, Tama stopped. "I won't cross into town with you. It would only provoke more anger right now." "When will I see you again?" Clara asked, reluctant to part from him. "Tomorrow. I'll wait for you here at midday." He touched her cheek gently. "Be careful, Clara. Watch for James Parker and his friends." "I will," she promised. Tama's eyes held hers for a long moment. Then he turned and disappeared into the trees along the riverbank. Clara watched until he was out of sight, then squared her shoulders and crossed the bridge into Willow Pass. The town seemed unusually quiet as she walked toward home. People hurried, passed with averted eyes, or crossed the street to avoid her altogether. Outside the general store, a group of women stopped talking abruptly when they saw her, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. Clara held her head high and continued walking. She was nearly home when she heard rapid footsteps behind her. Turning quickly, she was relieved to see it was only Mary hurrying to catch up with her. "Clara," Mary called, breathless. "Where have you been all day? Mother's been worried sick." "I was at my cabin," Clara replied. "Why? What's happened?" Mary glanced around nervously, then lowered her voice. "There was a meeting at the saloon last night. James Parker and some of the other men got drunk and started talking about teaching lessons to people who don't know their place." A chill ran down Clara's spine as she remembered the vandalized cabin and the crude doll. "They've already started. They destroyed things at my cabin, left threatening messages." Mary's eyes widened in alarm. "Clara, this is serious. James has always had a cruel streak, especially when he drinks. And now that you've rejected him publicly—" "I didn't reject him," Clara corrected. "We stopped courting years ago before I even left for college." "That's not how he sees it," Mary said urgently. "In his mind, you were supposed to come back from Boston and realize what a good match he would be. Instead, you've chosen someone he considers beneath him. His pride can't bear it." They had reached the Sutton house. Before going inside, Clara turned to her sister. "Mary, I appreciate your concern, but I won't let James Parker or anyone else frighten me away from Tama. I love him and he loves me," Mary sighed. "I know, I can see it in your face when you talk about him. Just, please be careful, and don't go to that cabin alone anymore. Promise me." "I promise," Clara said, hugging her sister. Tama said the same thing. He's going to make stronger locks for the doors and windows. Inside, they found their mother pacing the parlor, her face tight with worry. She rushed to Clara as soon as she entered. "Thank God you're safe," Elizabeth said, embracing her. "Clara, there's trouble brewing in town. Reverend Parker came to see me this morning. He says his son and some other men are talking about running the Indians out of the area completely." "They can't do that," Clara protested. "The Shoshone have rights to their land. Treaties don't mean much to angry men with guns," Elizabeth said grimly, "especially when they've convinced themselves they're protecting their community from some kind of threat." Clara sank into a chair, the weight of the situation suddenly overwhelming. This is because of me, isn't it? Because I love Tama. It's been building for years, Elizabeth said, sitting across from her. Your father used to argue with Reverend Parker about the Shoshone all the time. The Reverend wants their land for the railroad that's coming through next year. Harold stood against it, said the treaties should be honored. Clara looked up in surprise. Father defended the Shoshone. In his own way, yes, Elizabeth said. He was a businessman, not a humanitarian, but he believed in honoring agreements. And he respected the skills of the Shoshone hunters, who sometimes guided his expeditions. He didn't share the Reverend's extreme views. Clara was stunned by this revelation. Her father, whom she had always thought shared the town's prejudice, had actually been one of the few voices of reason. It made his letter and the gift of the land even more meaningful. What can we do, she asked. I won't give up Tama, but I don't want to bring violence down on his people either. Elizabeth squared her shoulders, a determined look coming into her eyes. We fight back in our own way. Your father had friends in the territorial government. I'll write to them, remind them of the treaties and the legal rights of the Shoshone. And you, Clara, need to be more careful than ever. The next day, Clara waited until her mother had gone to visit a friend before slipping out of the house to meet Tama at the bridge. As she walked through town, she felt eyes watching her from windows and doorways, but no one approached her directly. When she reached the bridge, Tama wasn't there. Clara waited, growing increasingly anxious as the minutes passed. It wasn't like him to be late. Had something happened? Finally, just as she was about to cross the river and look for him, she saw movement in the trees on the far bank. But it wasn't Tama who emerged. It was a young Shoshone woman Clara recognized as Naya, Tama's cousin. Naya approached cautiously, her dark eyes wary. Clara Sutton, she said, stopping a few feet away. Yes, Clara replied, her heart racing. Where's Tama? Is he all right? He sent me to bring you to him, Naya said. There is trouble. White men came to our village last night, fired shots, threatened to burn our homes if we didn't leave. Clara gasped. Was anyone hurt? No. But our elders are meeting now to decide what to do. Naya's expression softened slightly. Tama asked for you to be there. He says you have a voice that should be heard. Clara was both touched and terrified. Tama wanted her at a tribal council meeting, a clear statement of how important she was to him. But the escalation of violence against the Shoshone was even worse than she had feared. Take me to him, she said firmly. Naya nodded and led the way across the bridge and into the forest. They walked in silence for nearly an hour, following paths Clara had never seen before. Finally, they reached a clearing where several log cabins and traditional hide lodges formed a small settlement. In the center of the clearing, a group of men and women sat in a circle around a small fire. Tama was among them, seated beside an older man with silver hair and the same strong features as his son. When Tama saw Clara, he stood and came to meet her. You came, he said, relief evident in his voice. Of course, Clara replied. Naya told me what happened. Are you all right? Yes, they came at night, fired into the air, shouted threats. They were drunk, but the danger is real. Tama took her hand. My father wishes to meet you. Clara glanced nervously at the circle of people watching them. Are you sure this is a good idea? They must blame me for bringing this trouble to them. Some do, Tama admitted, but others understand that the hatred was already there, just waiting for an excuse. You didn't create it, Clara. He led her to the circle and presented her to the silver-haired man. Father, this is Clara Bell Sutton. Clara, my father, Chief Awakani. Clara nodded respectfully. I'm honored to meet you, sir. The old man studied her with penetrating dark eyes so like his son's. Sit, he said finally, gesturing to the space beside Tama. As Clara sat down, she was acutely aware of the curious and sometimes hostile stares from the others in the circle. One older woman leaned forward, speaking rapidly in Shoshone and gesturing toward Clara with obvious disapproval. Tama responded calmly in the same language, his voice steady and respectful. The woman shook her head, clearly unconvinced by whatever he had said. Chief Awakani held up his hand for silence, then spoke in English for Clara's benefit. My son tells me you love each other. that you wish to build a life together despite the anger of your people. Yes, Clara said clearly. I love your son with all my heart, and I'm deeply sorry for the trouble my feelings have brought to your community. The chief nodded slowly. Trouble comes in many forms, Clara Sutton. It is not always bad in the end. He glanced at his son. Tamar has told us of the land you own, at the bend in the river, land that once belonged to our ancestors. Clara swallowed hard, suddenly understanding the tension. The cabin and the land around it were left to me by my father, but I don't think of it as mine in the way white people usually do. I see myself as a caretaker, not an owner. This answer seemed to surprise the chief. He exchanged glances with several of the elders before continuing. And what do you propose to do with this land you caretake? Clara took a deep breath. I had hoped to make it a home for Tama and me, a place between our worlds where we could live in peace. The older woman who had spoken earlier said something sharply in Shoshone. Tama replied, his voice rising slightly in what seemed like a defense. What did she say? Clara asked quietly. She asked what will happen when we have children, Tama explained. Where they will belong, with her people or mine. The simple question hit Clara with unexpected force. Children. Of course there would be children if they married, mixed-blood children who would face prejudice from both communities. They will belong to themselves, she said firmly, addressing the entire circle, and to the family who loves them. They will learn the wisdom of both their heritages and choose their own path when they're old enough. Tamar translated her words, and Clara saw expressions of surprise and grudging respect on some faces. Chief Awakani nodded slowly, as if she had passed some test. The white men who came last night spoke of burning, of driving us from the land our grandfathers hunted, the chief said. What do you say to this, Clara Sutton? Will you stand with your people or with ours? I stand for justice, Clara said without hesitation. The men who threatened you, James Parker and his friends, don't speak for all of Willow Pass. My mother is writing to the territorial government about enforcing the treaties. There are laws protecting your right to this land. The chief's expression was skeptical. Laws written by white men can be broken by white men. Not if enough people stand against it, Clara insisted. My father opposed Reverend Parker's plans to take your land for the railroad. Others in town feel the same way. A murmur ran through the circle at the mention of the railroad. Clearly this was not news to them. So, the chief said, you would fight your own kind for us. For what's right, Clara corrected, and for Tama, who is the other half of my soul. Her words hung in the air for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, Chief Awakani smiled, a brief upturning of his lips that transformed his stern face. You have a warrior's heart, Clara Sutton, he said. Perhaps this is why my son loves you. The council meeting continued for another hour, with plans made for protecting the village and sending messages to other Shoshone settlements nearby. Clara listened and offered suggestions when asked, aware that she was being granted a rare privilege to participate in tribal matters. When the council finally dispersed, Tama took Clara aside. You did well, he said, pride evident in his voice. My father is impressed by your courage. I was terrified, Clara admitted, especially when they started talking about children. Tama's expression grew serious. It is a valid concern, Clara. Our children would belong to neither world fully. They would face challenges we cannot protect them from. I know, Clara said, taking his hands in hers, but they would also have something precious. Parents who truly love each other, who chose each other despite every obstacle. Tamar smiled, drawing her close. You always find the light even in the darkest shadows. They walked together to the edge of the village, where Naya waited to guide Clara back to the bridge. Before they parted, Tamar pressed something into Clara's hand, a small leather pouch on a cord. Wear this, he said. It contains protective herbs and a prayer stone blessed by my father. It will keep you safe until we meet again. Clara slipped the cord over her head, tucking the pouch beneath her dress. When will that be? Tomorrow, Tamar said. I will come to your cabin at dawn. There are things we must prepare if trouble is coming. Clara nodded, then stood on tiptoe to kiss him goodbye. As she followed Naya back through the forest, the weight of the medicine pouch against her skin was a constant reminder of Tama's love. and of the danger they both faced. When Clara returned home, she found the house in an uproar. Mary ran to her as soon as she entered, her face streaked with tears. "Where have you been?" Mary cried. "We've been frantic." "I was with Tamar," Clara explained. "What's happened?" Elizabeth appeared from the study, her expression grim. "James. Parker and his friends set fire to the church early this morning. Then they painted a message on our front gate. Sin brings fire." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "The church? But why would they—" "To blame the Shoshone," Elizabeth said tightly. "To turn the town against them completely. Reverend Parker is already preaching that it was retaliation for your relationship with Tama." "That's a lie," Clara exclaimed. "The Shoshone were at their village all night. They were the ones who were threatened." "It doesn't matter what's true," Mary said, her voice trembling. "People are believing it. There's talk of forming a militia to drive the Indians away once and for all." Clara sank into a chair, her mind racing. This was worse than she had imagined. Not just threats and vandalism, but a deliberate attempt to incite violence against Tamar's people. "We have to stop this," she said, looking up at her mother and sister. "We have to tell the truth about what James and his friends are doing." "We will," Elizabeth said firmly. "I've already sent for the sheriff from the county seat. He'll be here tomorrow to investigate the fire. Until then, you must stay inside, Clara. It's not safe for you in town right now." Clara thought of her promise to meet Tama at the cabin at dawn. "I can't," she said. "I have to go to my cabin tomorrow." "Tama will be waiting for me." "It's too dangerous," Elizabeth insisted. "These men have shown they're willing to commit arson and blame others. What do you think they might do to you, alone at that cabin?" "I won't be alone," Clara said. "Tama will be there. And I won't let fear keep me from him." Elizabeth and Mary exchanged worried glances. Finally, Elizabeth sighed in resignation. "Then I'm coming with you," she said. "Both of us are. If you're determined to go, you'll have your family beside you." Clara looked at her mother in surprise. "You would do that? Stand with me and Tamar?" "You're my daughter," Elizabeth said simply. "Whatever choices you make, whatever path you follow, that will never change. And it's time I met this man who has captured your heart so completely." That night, as Clara prepared for bed, she heard a soft tapping at her window. Drawing back the curtain cautiously, she was startled to see Tamar perched on the branch of the oak tree that grew beside the house. She quickly opened the window. "Tamar, what are you doing here? It's dangerous." "I had to warn you," he said urgently. "Don't come to the cabin tomorrow. It's a trap." "What? How do you know?" "I went there this evening to begin strengthening the doors. I found fresh tracks, men hiding in the woods nearby, watching the cabin." Tamar's face was grim in the moonlight. "They're waiting for us, Clara. For you." A chill ran down Clara's spine. "James," she whispered. "He's behind this, I know it." "Whoever it is, they mean harm," Tamar said. "Stay away from the cabin tomorrow. Stay here where it's safe." "But what about you?" Clara asked, reaching through the window to touch his face. "If they're watching the cabin, they might be watching your village too." "My people are alert. We've set guards." Tamar caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "We will meet again when it's safer, I promise." Before Clara could respond, he slipped back into the darkness, moving with the silent grace that had always been part of his nature. Clara stood at the window long after he had gone, watching the night and feeling a growing dread in her heart. The fire at the church, the message on their gate, the trap at the cabin. James Parker was escalating his campaign against them, becoming more dangerous with each passing day. And Clara feared that before this was over, someone would pay a terrible price for their love. The sheriff from the county seat arrived in Willow Pass the next morning, a tall, weathered man named John Blackwood, who had little patience for small town politics. Elizabeth Sutton wasted no time in bringing him to the house, where Clara told him everything, from her relationship with Tama to James Parker's escalating threats. "So you believe this Parker fella burned down the church himself, then blamed the Indians for it?" Sheriff Blackwood asked, scribbling notes in a small book. "Yes," Clara said firmly. "And he and his friends vandalized my cabin, threatened the Shoshone village, and now they've set some kind of trap there." The sheriff studied her face, as if gauging her sincerity. That's a serious accusation, Miss Sutton, especially against the son of the town's preacher. It's the truth, Clara insisted. James has always been vindictive when he doesn't get his way, and he can't stand that I chose Tama over him. We have proof that the Shoshone couldn't have burned the church, Elizabeth added, stepping forward. They were at their village all night, being threatened by James and his friends. Many people saw them there, Sheriff Blackwood nodded slowly. I'll need to speak with this Tama and his people, and I'll have a look at your cabin, Miss Sutton. If there's evidence of a trap, as you say, that's a criminal matter. I'll take you there, Clara offered, but we should be careful. Tama saw men watching the cabin last night. Don't worry, miss, I've dealt with troublemakers before. The sheriff patted the pistol at his side. Now where can I find this preacher's son? As if on cue, a commotion erupted outside. Clara rushed to the window to see a group of men on horseback gathered in the street, led by James Parker. Several carried rifles and all wore grim expressions. They're forming a posse, Clara gasped. James is leading them toward the river. Sheriff Blackwood moved to the window, his expression hardening as he took in the scene. Looks like I'd better have a word with Mr. Parker right now. He strode out the front door, his hand resting on his pistol. Clara, Elizabeth, and Mary followed, hearts racing as they watched the confrontation unfold. What's going on here? The sheriff called out, his authoritative voice cutting through the muttered conversations of the assembled men. James Parker turned his horse, his handsome face flushed with excitement and alcohol despite the early hour. Sheriff, good timing. We're just heading out to deal with some Indian trouble. Care to join us? Actually, I'm here to investigate the church fire, Blackwood replied evenly. And I've heard some interesting theories about how that started. James's eyes flicked to Clara, narrowing dangerously. The savages burned it. Everyone knows that. Do they? The sheriff stepped closer. Because I've got witnesses saying you and your boys were out threatening those same savages the night before the fire. Mighty convenient timing. A murmur ran through the gathered men. Some looked uncertainly at James, whose face had darkened with anger. Who's been spreading lies? He demanded. That Indian-loving Sutton girl? She's bewitched. Can't see straight when it comes to her savage. Watch your mouth, son, Blackwood warned. That's no way to speak about a lady. Now why don't you all get down off those horses and we can have a civilized conversation about what happened to that church? We don't have time for talk, James spat. They're probably planning their next attack right now. We're going to drive them out once and for all. Several of the men nodded in agreement, but others looked increasingly uncomfortable, especially with the sheriff present. James, called a new voice from the crowd. Thomas Whitaker, Mary's fiancé, urged his horse forward. Maybe we should listen to the sheriff if there's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, James shouted. First they take our women, then they burn our church. What's next? Our homes? Our lives? He pointed dramatically at Clara. Look at her, defending them even now. She's as good as one of them. Clara stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. Yes, I love Tama. I'm proud to stand with him and his people against your hatred. But they didn't burn the church, James. You did. To turn the town against them, to give yourself an excuse for violence. Prove it, James sneered. I intend to. Sheriff Blackwood said, Mr. Parker, I'm asking you and your men to dismount and disperse. This is now an official investigation. For a tense moment, it seemed James might refuse. Then Thomas Whitaker dismounted, followed by several other men. The momentum of the posse began to falter. This isn't over, James hissed, glaring at Clara. Not by a long shot. He wheeled his horse around and galloped away, followed by a handful of his most loyal followers. The rest of the men stayed behind, looking uncertainly between the sheriff and the retreating figures. Anyone else care to join Mr. Parker? Blackwood asked mildly. When no one moved, he nodded in satisfaction. Good. Now I'd like to speak with each of you about what you saw and heard regarding that church fire. As the sheriff organized the remaining men, Clara turned to find Thomas Whitaker standing nearby, his expression troubled. Thomas, she acknowledged, cautiously. Thank you for speaking up. James has gone too far, Thomas replied, running a hand through his sandy hair. Many of us only joined because he said the Indians had burned the church. But the things he was saying as we gathered... He shook his head. It wasn't right. Mary stepped forward to stand beside Clara. Thomas, do you believe my sister? About James starting the fire himself? Thomas looked between the sisters, his honest face reflecting his inner conflict. I don't know what to believe anymore, but I know James has always been volatile, especially when drinking. If you know anything that might help clear the Shoshone of blame, please tell the sheriff, Clara urged. Lives could depend on it. Thomas nodded slowly. I will. And Mary, he turned to his fiancée, his expression softening. I hope you know I would never want to hurt your family, no matter what. Mary reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. I know. As Thomas walked away to speak with the sheriff, Elizabeth put her arms around both her daughters. I'm proud of you girls, she said softly. Standing up for what's right isn't easy. I'm worried about Tama, Clara said, scanning the road toward the river. If James and his friends went that way, the sheriff will handle it, Elizabeth assured her. That's his job. But Clara wasn't convinced. James is desperate now, there's no telling what he might do. Before they could discuss it further, they heard hoofbeats approaching from the direction of the river. Clara's heart leapt to her throat as she saw Tama galloping toward them on a spotted pony, his face grim with urgency. Clara, he called, reining in the horse before her. James Parker and his men are at the cabin. They've set fire to it. What? Clara gasped. But why? There's nothing there worth... It's not about the cabin, Tamar said, his dark eyes intense. It's a message, a warning of what they plan for my village next. Sheriff Blackwood strode over, having heard the exchange. You're Tama, I take it? Tama nodded, eyeing the lawman warily. I'm investigating the church fire, Blackwood explained. And now it seems I have another arson to look into. Can you take us to this cabin? Yes, Tamar said, but we must hurry. The fire was just starting when I left. Clara turned to her mother. We need horses, fast ones. Within minutes they had assembled a small group. Clara, Tama, Sheriff Blackwood, Thomas Whitaker, and several other men from town who had turned against James. Elizabeth and Mary stayed behind to organize a bucket brigade in case they could save the cabin. As they rode toward the river, Clara's heart pounded with fear and anger. The cabin represented more than just property to her. It was the promise of a future with Tama, a bridge between their worlds. And now James was trying to burn that bridge before it could even be built. They smelled the smoke before they saw it, thick, black and acrid on the morning air. When they crested the hill overlooking the cabin, Clara cried out in dismay. The small structure was fully engulfed in flames, with James and 3 other men watching from horseback nearby. There they are, Thomas shouted, pointing. James looked up, his face twisting with rage when he saw Tama riding beside Clara. He drew his rifle, aiming it directly at the Shoshone man. No! Clara screamed, spurring her horse forward. Sheriff Blackwood was faster, drawing his pistol and firing a warning shot into the air. Drop the weapon, Parker, now! James hesitated, his rifle still trained on Tama. For a terrible moment, Clara thought he would fire anyway. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun. It's over. Parker, the sheriff called, riding closer. We know you started the church fire. Thomas and the others have told me everything. How you plan to blame the Shoshone. How you've been threatening Miss Sutton and her Indian friend. You're taking the word of a savage lover over mine? James spat, glaring at Thomas. My father won't stand for this. Your father can take it up with the judge, Blackwood replied evenly. Now drop that rifle on the ground and get off your horse. You're under arrest for arson, attempted murder and inciting violence. James looked at his remaining supporters, but they were already backing away, unwilling to face the sheriff's justice. With a snarl of frustration, he flung the rifle down. You'll regret this, he said, his eyes fixed on Clara. All of you. As the sheriff handcuffed James, Clara and Tama rode to the burning cabin. It was too late to save the structure. The flames had consumed most of it already. They watched in silence as their dreams seemed to turn to ash before their eyes. I'm sorry, Clara, Tama said quietly. I know what this place meant to you. Clara reached for his hand. It's just a building. What matters is that we're both safe. She turned to him, determination replacing her sorrow. We'll rebuild, Tama, better than before. He smiled, squeezing her hand. Together. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity in Willow Pass. James Parker and his closest accomplices were taken to the county seat to await trial. Reverend Parker, shamed by his son's actions, announced he would be leaving town to reflect on God's will at a monastery in the east. Meanwhile, Clara and Tamar began planning the reconstruction of the cabin. To their surprise, many townspeople offered to help, including Thomas Whitaker and several other men who had initially joined James's posse. "It's the least we can do," Thomas told Clara as they surveyed the charred remains of the cabin. "To make amends for following James blindly." Mary, standing beside her fiancé, smiled at her sister. "And to welcome our new neighbors properly." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Our?" Mary glanced at Thomas, who nodded encouragingly. "We've been talking," she said, "about what true happiness means, about following your heart instead of just doing what's expected." She took a deep breath. "We're postponing our wedding. Thomas is going to study law in the city, and I'm going with him, as his assistant, not just his wife." Clara hugged her sister tightly, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Mary, both of you." "We learned from you," Thomas said simply. "You showed us what courage looks like." As spring turned to early summer, the cabin rose anew by the river, larger and sturdier than before, with windows that caught the morning sun and a wide porch overlooking the water. Tamar and Clara worked side by side with volunteers from both the town and the Shoshone village, creating not just a home, but a symbol of what could be possible between their communities. Chief Awakani visited often, offering advice on the best materials and construction methods for the harsh winters. He had grown fond of Clara, impressed by her strength during the confrontation with James Parker and her dedication to building something that honored both their traditions. "My son has chosen well," he told her one evening, as they watched the sunset from the newly completed porch. "You have the heart of a Shoshone woman, fierce, loyal, unafraid." Clara smiled, touched by his words. "I'm learning from your people every day, about living in harmony with the land, about what truly matters." The old chief nodded, his weathered face solemn. "And my people learn from you, about standing firm for justice, about seeing beyond old hatreds." 2 weeks later, on a perfect summer morning, Clara stood in her bedroom at the Sutton house, allowing her mother to help her into a simple white dress. It wasn't a traditional wedding gown, there was nothing traditional about this day, but it was beautiful in its simplicity, with delicate embroidery along the hem that Clara had done herself. "Are you nervous?" Elizabeth asked, pinning wildflowers in Clara's dark hair. "No," Clara replied honestly. "This feels right, Mother, like I've been walking toward this day my whole life." Elizabeth's eyes glistened with tears as she adjusted the flowers. "I wish your father could see you. He would be proud, I think, despite everything." "He sees," Clara said softly, touching the letter she kept in a locket around her neck. "He understands now." They made their way downstairs, where Mary waited with a bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the meadow near the new cabin. Outside, a small wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers would take them to the river, to the very spot where 15 years ago a young Tamar had pulled a drowning Clara from the water. The site of the ceremony was transformed. Colorful blankets had been spread on the grassy bank, and an arch of woven branches and flowers marked the spot where the bride and groom would stand. On one side sat the people from town who had chosen to attend, a smaller group than might have come to a conventional wedding, but each face showing genuine support. On the other side were members of the Shoshone tribe, dressed in their finest clothes, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and cautious acceptance. As Clara walked toward the arch, where Tamar waited with his father and the elderly judge, who had agreed to perform the ceremony, she felt a profound sense of rightness wash over her. This was her path, the one she had been searching for all those years in Boston, the one that had brought her back to Willow Pass, and to the man who now watched her approach with love shining in his dark eyes. Tamar wore a combination of traditional Shoshone ceremonial clothing and a white man's suit jacket, a visual representation of the bridge they were building between their worlds. Around his neck hung the ceremonial beads of his people, and in his hair was a single eagle feather, marking him as a man of courage. When Clara reached him, he took her hands in his touch warm and steady. "You are beautiful," he said simply. The judge cleared his throat and began the ceremony, a blend of traditional wedding vows and Shoshone blessings translated by Chief Awakani. The words washed over Clara like the river beside them, timeless and powerful. When it came time for their vows, Tama spoke first, his voice clear and strong. "Clara Bell Sutton, you were brought to me by the river when we were children. Now, as a man, I choose to walk beside you for all my days. I will honor your spirit, protect your heart, and love you with everything I am." Clara blinked back tears as she responded, "Tama, you saved me twice, once from drowning, and once from a life half-lived. I promise to stand with you against any storm, to honor your traditions as you honor mine, and to love you until my last breath." The judge pronounced them husband and wife, and as Tama leaned down to kiss her, a cheer rose from both sides of the gathering. Hesitant at first, then growing stronger, as people from town and tribe alike celebrated the union that symbolized a new beginning for all of them. The celebration continued well into the evening, with food and music from both cultures creating a joyful atmosphere. Clara and Tama moved between the groups, bridging the divide with their shared happiness. As the sun began to set, painting the river in shades of gold and crimson, Tama led Clara away from the gathering to a quiet spot upstream. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small carved wooden box and opened it to reveal 2 rings, simple bands of silver with intricate engravings of river waves around the circumference. "My father helped me make them," Tama explained, taking one of the rings. "The river that brought us together, now binding us forever." He slipped the ring onto Clara's finger, and she did the same for him, her heart so full she could barely speak. "They're perfect," she finally managed, "just like this day." Tama drew her close, his arms strong around her. "Not perfect," he corrected gently. "Real, with all the struggles and joy that brings." Clara laughed softly. "You're right, and I wouldn't have it any other way." They returned to the celebration hand in hand, the silver rings catching the last light of day. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit along the riverbank, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Clara looked around at the faces of her family, the townspeople who had chosen acceptance over hatred, and the Shoshone who had welcomed her despite their reservations. This was what her father had given her, though he hadn't lived to see it. Not just land, but the chance to build something new. A life that honored the past while creating a different future. A love that defied boundaries and expectations. Later that night, as Clara and Tama walked to their cabin, now truly their home, they paused on the bridge that spanned the river between town and wilderness. Behind them, the last of the wedding, guests were making their way home, their lanterns moving like fireflies in the darkness. "We did it," Clara said, looking up at her husband. "Despite everything, we found our way to each other." Tama smiled, touching her face gently. "The river always finds its path, no matter what stands in its way, and so did we." As they turned to continue their journey home, a sudden glow on the horizon caught their attention. Orange flames leapt up against the night sky, coming from the direction of town. "Fire!" Clara gasped. "It looks like it's near the church." They rushed back across the bridge, meeting Thomas and several others running toward the blaze. "It's the remains of the church," Thomas called. "Someone set fire to what was left of it." When they reached the site, they found the charred skeleton of the church fully engulfed in flames, and on the fence nearby a message had been painted in crude letters: "Sin brings fire." Clara gripped Tama's hand tightly. "James," she whispered, "but he's in jail." "His father," Tama said grimly. "Or someone who believes as they do." They stood watching as townspeople formed a bucket brigade to prevent the fire from spreading to nearby buildings. The church itself was beyond saving, just a blackened frame collapsing into ash. "We didn't bring this," Clara said, her voice trembling with anger and grief. "This hatred, this destruction." "No," Tama replied, putting his arm around her shoulders. "But maybe it had to burn for something new to grow." Clara looked up at him, finding strength in his steady gaze. "You're right. From these ashes, we'll build something better. Together." As they joined the bucket brigade, working side by side, with people from town and tribe alike, Clara felt a sense of determination replace her fear. The road ahead would not be easy. There would always be those who clung to hatred and fear of difference. But tonight had shown her something powerful. When people chose love over fear, connection over division, they could overcome even the deepest prejudices. And as for her and Tama, they had the river, they had their home, and they had each other. Whatever challenges came, they would face them together, their love as steady and enduring as the current that had brought them together all those years ago. The girl from the river and the man in her heart had found their way home at last.